The 14th floor of the Ashcroft Grand Hotel held more secrets than its gold-framed mirrors could reflect. Silence wrapped the corridor like velvet, broken only by the hum of air vents and the distant clink of crystal chandeliers. Irina Solovey stood alone inside the presidential suite, her navy uniform pressed to perfection, though her heartbeat thudded loud enough to betray her calm. She stared at the name glowing on the room's landline screen, Mamochka, Russian for mommy. A word she hadn't heard in nearly 10 years. A word that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Against every rule she'd ever been told, she answered. Oh? The voice cracked through the line like a whisper from a coffin. It used her birth name, Alyona, a name she buried the day she fled Russia. You have the wrong number, she replied in clipped English. But the voice didn't stop. It knew her. It spoke of a man long thought dead. Your father, he's alive. And he knows where you are. The receiver slipped from her hand and hit the hardwood floor with a dull, final thud. She froze. The air around her felt heavier now, as if the chandelier above might crash at any moment. And then, she noticed him. Standing in the doorway, silent and watchful, was Holden Ashcroft, billionaire hotel heir, man of the hour, and fiancé to a senator's daughter. His posture was casual, but his gray eyes had already gathered every detail. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone smooth but razor-sharp. Irina swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. Just a wrong number." But the lie settled poorly in the air between them. Later that morning, Holden stood alone in his office, the Boston skyline sprawling behind him. He had called off the ballroom reservations, quietly. The wedding, set for 3 days from now, could wait. Something about that girl. The language, the look on her face. It wasn't just a wrong number. It was a warning. That night, Irina sat in her staff dormitory, knees tucked to her chest, ripping open an old shoebox hidden beneath the floorboard. Inside were pieces of a life she'd abandoned. Faded photographs, torn letters, and a cassette tape labeled Papa. Her father, the man who was supposed to have died in a fire. The man whose name had been erased from every document, every memory. Until now. And across the city, Holden made a quiet phone call. "I need everything you can find on a woman named Irina Solovey, and on a man called Viktor Ivanovich." The next morning at the Ashcroft Grand Hotel began like any other. Fresh linens, polished marble floors, and staff members moving quietly through the halls like clockwork. But for Irina Solovey, everything felt off. Every sound echoed louder. Every face seemed to study her. She moved through her tasks like a ghost, her mind spinning back to the voice on the phone and the name she thought she had buried forever. Viktor Ivanovich. Her father. Her past. A name that should never have reached this side of the world, let alone the private suite of Holden Ashcroft. Irina thought she had covered her tracks well. The fake last name, the immigration through Canada, the years spent hiding in plain sight. She had created a quiet life of invisibility, folding towels, vacuuming rooms, smiling at guests without ever really being seen. But now, one call had shattered that silence. And worse, Holden had heard just enough to be dangerous. Not just to her, but maybe to himself. There were things he couldn't possibly understand. Things she barely understood. Meanwhile, in a private room high above the city, Holden Ashcroft studied the folder that his security team delivered that morning. A single photograph of a man with harsh eyes and a Soviet military uniform. Below it, Viktor Ivanovich Solovey. Deceased. Allegedly. The word allegedly annoyed him. Holden wasn't used to uncertainties, and he hated how the name felt familiar, as if it scratched at some old part of him, some half-memory long ignored. He flipped through the next page. There, in faded ink, was something that made his blood chill. The name Victor had appeared in a declassified CIA report from the early 2000s, involving money laundering, arms deals, and the death of an American diplomat in Moscow. Holden stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the city. What had he stumbled into? Was Irina an innocent woman with a haunted past? Or had she brought something far more dangerous into his life? And then came the worst thought of all. Had Claire, his fiancée, known any of this? Back in the laundry room, Irina sat alone, folding towels with robotic precision. Every crease, every corner, a silent prayer to keep herself grounded. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way Holden had looked at her. Not with suspicion, but with recognition. As if he'd seen something in her that even she had forgotten. She had to leave. Disappear again. Before the past reached out and swallowed her whole. But by the time she made up her mind to run, it was already too late. A sealed envelope had been slipped under her door. Her name was typed neatly on the front, but the signature on the back was her father's. Irina stared at the envelope in her trembling hands. The paper was thick, expensive, out of place in the staff hallway where only utility carts and forgotten linens usually lingered. Her name was typed in clean block letters. But it was the handwriting on the back, a looping, deliberate signature in Cyrillic, that made her legs weaken beneath her. V.I. Solovey. Her father. A man she'd mourned, cursed, and then erased from every chapter of her life. Now, that signature reached out like a ghost's touch, dragging her back into a world she had tried to bury. She closed the door to her tiny room, heart hammering in her chest. The envelope trembled as she opened it, tearing slowly at the edge like peeling a wound. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No greeting. No date. Just a message typed in Russian. You are not safe. They found you because of the wedding. Watch the man in the suit. Trust no one. Not even him. Irina backed into the wall, the words sinking deep into her bones. The man in the suit. That could only mean one person, Holden Ashcroft. Upstairs, Holden reviewed the names of the wedding guest list, now with a different purpose. It wasn't about celebration anymore. It was about strategy. The Whitmores, the Blaines, the international business contacts, people who held power and secrets. Claire had insisted on a guest from the Russian consulate. That detail hadn't mattered yesterday. Today it meant something. Something dangerous. And if Irina's father was alive, someone must want him dead. Or worse, someone might want her dead to get to him. Irina barely slept that night. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. Footsteps echoed wrong. And every knock at her door sounded like the beginning of an end. The past wasn't just following her anymore. It had arrived. She replayed the message over and over. Not even him. Could Holden be part of this? Was his curiosity genuine or orchestrated? She didn't want to believe he was involved. But she had learned long ago, trust could be lethal. By morning, she had a plan. She would confront him, not with anger, but with quiet truth. She needed answers. And Holden seemed to be searching for them too. So she waited until he entered the atrium alone, sipping coffee beneath a hanging orchid, scanning the day's schedule like it bored him. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice low and steady. He looked up, not surprised. I was hoping you would. Holden gestured to the empty seat across from him. His expression was unreadable, but Irina noticed the subtle tension in his jaw. As she sat down, the sweet scent of the orchid overhead seemed strangely out of place, like something trying too hard to be beautiful. She clutched the note inside her coat pocket, unsure whether to show him or stay silent. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy. Like both knew they were sitting on top of something that could collapse at any second. I know who you are, Holden said finally, his voice calm but direct. Irina Solovey, daughter of Viktor Ivanovich. Or should I say, Alyona? Her breath caught. No one had called her that in years. He watched her carefully. Your name didn't appear in any employee background checks. That's not an accident. And now someone's using my hotel phone to reach you. What's going on? She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her coat and laid the note gently on the table between them. He picked it up slowly, his eyes scanning the Cyrillic print. His face darkened as he read. When he looked up, the controlled detachment in his expression was gone. "Someone's watching you," he said. "And maybe watching me." She nodded. "The note said not to trust you," she whispered. "But I don't think I have a choice." Holden leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Whoever left this knows too much. This wedding, it's attracting the wrong kind of attention. Russian guests, diplomatic immunity, media coverage. If someone wanted to draw out your father, this would be the stage." Irina's hands trembled on the table. "I thought he was dead." She looked up. "I watched the house burn." For the first time, Holden's voice softened. "Sometimes the dead stay dead, and sometimes they wait for the right moment to return." Irina met his eyes. There was no warmth there, only wariness. They were two people tangled in something neither of them fully understood. And the longer they sat there, the clearer it became. The past wasn't behind them. It was circling. "I want to help," he said quietly. "But if we're going to survive whatever this is, I need the whole truth." Irina hesitated, her throat dry. "Then you should know," she whispered. "My father wasn't just a man. He was a weapon. And someone out there still wants to use him." At that moment, Holden's phone buzzed. One message. One line. "We know about her." Holden stared at the message on his phone like it had been carved in ice. "We know about her." No name. No number. Just a quiet, calculated threat. He tilted the screen toward Irina, who read it in silence. Her breath caught somewhere in her throat. It wasn't just a warning, it was confirmation. Someone was watching. Someone powerful enough to breach Holden Ashcroft's private number without leaving a trace. That kind of reach didn't come from curiosity. It came from old enemies resurfacing. "Did you tell anyone about me?" she asked, voice tight, almost accusing. "No one," he replied immediately. "But someone already knew you were here." He stood, suddenly restless, pacing near the edge of the atrium where guests dined below, laughing unaware. "This hotel has security teams trained by former intelligence. I'll pull surveillance, trace the signal." "But Irina," he turned to her, "if this goes deeper than a mistake, you have to tell me what your father was really involved in." Irina looked down at her hands. There were memories she had buried so deeply that even saying them aloud felt dangerous. He wasn't just KGB. That part's true. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, he didn't stop. He used what he knew to build something darker. Deals, secrets, weapon access. He had clients from both sides of the ocean. She paused. "And when I was 13, I overheard something I shouldn't have. The night before the fire." Holden's eyes narrowed. "What did you hear?" Irina shook her head slowly. "A name. An American. I never understood who he was. But it made my father furious. It was the last fight I ever heard in that house." She blinked, forcing back the memory of screams and smoke. "The next day, the fire started. I escaped. They didn't." Holden stood motionless for a moment. The pieces were forming a pattern, a long-buried operation, a man presumed dead, and now his daughter, hiding under his roof. And now, someone wants to know if Victor is still alive. "Maybe they think you know how to find him." He picked up his phone and made a call, speaking in a low voice. "Lock down the East Wing. No staff in or out without my clearance. And send me the guest list, again." Full background, especially the consulate members. Irina felt her chest tighten. The more Holden got involved, the more danger he invited into his world. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. But Holden didn't flinch. "Someone came after you in my hotel," he said. "That makes it personal." And far above them, on a rooftop across the street, a camera lens focused silently through a scope, fixed directly on Irina. The hotel's security footage had gaps. That alone was enough to make Holden uneasy. In a place where every hallway was supposed to be monitored 24/7, 3 minutes of missing footage from the service entrance were more than a technical glitch. They were deliberate. And during those exact 3 minutes, someone had slipped an envelope under Irina's door. Holden stood in the control room, staring at the black screen where there should have been answers. "This isn't a coincidence," he muttered. Meanwhile, Irina couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even as she stood in the sunlight of the East Garden, surrounded by tourists and blooming magnolias, her body was tense, her senses alert. Her eyes scanned the rooftops around the hotel, tall buildings that could easily hide a threat. Her father's warning echoed in her ears like a slow drumbeat. "They found you because of the wedding." The ceremony had become a stage, and she, unwillingly, was at its center. Holden met her there minutes later, eyes sharp, suit flawless, but his calm was gone. "Someone's already inside the hotel," he said quietly. "Security's compromised. My team's running sweeps, but we're blind in places that should never go dark. I need you to tell me something else, Irina. Anything about that American name you heard the night of the fire." She shook her head. "I was just a child. I only remember the name sounded fake. American, but wrong. My mother screamed something like Grave Son or Gravik. It didn't make sense at the time. I thought it was a code word." She looked at Holden, but I never forgot the fear in her voice. Holden froze for a moment. "Gravik," he repeated slowly. "That's not just a name." He pulled out his phone and opened a secure folder from his intelligence contacts. "There's a report from 2003. Gravik was a CIA asset who went rogue, disappeared after a failed operation in Moscow. He was never found." He met her eyes. "If your father crossed paths with him, there's a chance they weren't enemies. Or they were the kind of enemies that never leave loose ends." Across the street, on a rooftop obscured by shadows, a figure adjusted the scope of a long-range rifle. The man was dressed in black, face hidden beneath a cap, breath steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had waited years for this signal, for Irina Solovey to surface. A small red dot blinked once on his earpiece, then twice. And just like that, he loaded the chamber. The first shot never came. Not because the sniper hesitated, but because something disrupted his view. A white maintenance curtain flapped across the rooftop opposite him, obscuring his target for no more than 3 seconds. But in his world, 3 seconds was an eternity. He muttered something in Russian, lowered his rifle, and adjusted his scope. By the time he locked back in on the garden courtyard below, Irina was gone. Holden had noticed the shimmer, not in the air, but in instinct. He felt it just before the light shifted unnaturally, and a sharp glint reflected from a rooftop. It was brief, almost unnoticeable, but it was enough. "Come with me." "Now," he said, grabbing Irina's wrist with calm urgency. She didn't argue. They cut through the garden path, slipping behind a hedge-lined corridor that led to the staff elevators. Holden didn't wait for explanations. He moved like a man who'd been in danger before. And Irina followed because, for the first time in years, she felt that running might no longer be enough. They rode the elevator in silence. Holden's mind was racing. Too many threats, too many blind spots. "This isn't surveillance anymore," he finally said. "That was a kill shot." Irina leaned against the wall, pale, lips trembling. "They were never going to talk to me," she whispered. "They wanted to erase me." She looked at him. "And now you're involved." Holden stepped out into the security wing, nodding at two armed guards waiting at the end of the hall. "Then we find out who gave the order." He opened a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a reinforced room, his private intelligence hub. Screens lit up instantly, showing heat signatures, exterior building angles, and every rooftop in a 6-block radius. One was marked in red, the origin point of the glint he had seen. "I want eyes on that roof," he told his team. "Now." Irina's hands clenched. "If they're using Gravik's network," she said, "they won't stop. My father must have known something they still think I have. But I don't. I don't know anything." Her voice cracked. "I was just a girl hiding under a staircase while my family burned." Holden placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then we stop pretending this is about the past," he said. "It's about what your father left behind. Something someone's willing to kill for." And as one of the rooftop cameras zoomed in, a second shooter stepped into frame, with a clear view of Holden's penthouse window. The camera feed flickered for a second, but long enough to confirm it. Another figure had appeared on the rooftop adjacent to Holden's penthouse. This one didn't carry a rifle. He wore a sleek communication headset, his silhouette lean and methodical. The posture alone told Holden everything. This wasn't a backup. This was a coordinator. The kind of man who never pulled the trigger, but gave the order to do it. And worse, he was looking directly into the lens. They were no longer just being hunted. They were being watched, closely, deliberately. Inside the security hub, Irina stepped back from the screen, her pulse pounding in her ears. "They know where we are," she whispered. "They know we're watching." Holden nodded grimly. "And they're not hiding anymore." He tapped a command on the console, signaling a full lockdown of the penthouse floor. All exterior windows were sealed. Security personnel deployed to each exit. "They're forcing us into a corner," he muttered. "Which means they're ready to make a move." Irina turned to him, her voice urgent. "There's something else. I didn't tell you. My father left something behind." Holden's eyes met hers, sharp and focused. "What?" She hesitated. "A small black safe. He hid it inside the foundation of the old family dacha, under a false floorboard. He made me memorize the location, said never to return unless I had no other choice." Her hands trembled. "I thought it was just paranoia. But now, maybe it's the key to all of this." Holden processed quickly. "If they believe you still know where it is, that safe could hold whatever Gravik or whoever's behind this is trying to recover, or destroy." He turned to his team. "Prep the jet. We're going to Russia." Irina froze. "You're coming with me?" He looked at her with calm certainty. "If you go alone, they'll kill you before you reach the airport. This isn't your fight anymore, Irina. It's ours." But as they moved through the lower hallway to exit the security wing, the lights above them flickered, once, then twice. Holden stopped walking. "That's not a malfunction," he said, drawing a sidearm from beneath his jacket. Irina's breath hitched. "How do you know?" "Because I designed this system. And only one person knows the override sequence besides me." He turned slowly toward the darkened end of the hallway, just as the elevator dinged open. And stepping out was Claire Whitmore, in a black coat, flanked by two silent men in military-grade earpieces. Claire Whitmore stepped out of the elevator like she owned the corridor, not as a bride-to-be, but as someone who had just revealed the final card in a game no one else knew they were playing. Her black coat was crisp, her posture precise, and her expression unreadable. The two men behind her flanked her like bodyguards, but Holden recognized the way they moved, military-trained, not hotel security. Irina took an instinctive step back, but Holden raised his arm, shielding her slightly. "Claire," he said carefully, "what the hell is this?" Claire's gaze shifted to Irina, cold and calculated. "She's the reason this entire wedding has been under surveillance for months," she said calmly. "Did you really think no one noticed when the daughter of Viktor Ivanovich resurfaced under your nose?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was clinical. "They sent me to make sure she stayed hidden. But you, Holden, you just couldn't leave it alone." Irina's eyes widened. "You were watching me?" Claire smirked slightly. "You walked into the lion's den the day you applied here. You just didn't know the lion had already made a deal with the hunters." She turned to Holden. "Do you know what's in that safe your girlfriend wants to dig up? Names. Accounts. Files your father once buried to keep his empire intact. Files that could dismantle governments and corporations like yours." Holden's voice turned ice-cold. "So what are you, Claire? CIA? Foreign asset? Just a pawn in someone else's game?" Her jaw tensed for the first time. "I was your fiancé, and I did love you once. But I also believe in something bigger than either of us, control." She nodded to the men behind her. "Irina comes with us. Quietly. Or things get messy." But Holden didn't move. "You're standing on my floor, Claire. In my building. With my systems watching every move you make." He tilted his head slightly. "You really think I'd walk blindly into this?" And at that moment, a piercing alarm rang through the corridor. Not from Holden's systems, but from Claire's earpiece. The man on her right stiffened. The voice on the line said one thing: "The second shooter's gone." Chaos erupted. Holden moved first, disarming the nearest guard with military precision. Irina ducked as the second man reached for her, only to be tackled by security bursting in through the service door. Claire, momentarily disarmed, backed against the wall, breathing hard. Holden pointed his weapon at her. "You played both sides, Claire. But you forgot one thing." His voice dropped, razor sharp. "I don't lose on my own turf." The aftermath of the confrontation felt like the calm after a storm that had almost swallowed everything. Claire Whitmore was in federal custody by nightfall, escorted out of the Ashcroft Grand Hotel in silence. She said nothing. Not when Holden confronted her. Not when Irina looked her in the eye. The woman who once smiled at bridal magazines now sat like a cold vessel, emptied of anything that had once resembled love or loyalty. Her mission had failed. But Holden knew better. People like Claire didn't play solo. She was a small piece of something larger, something still watching. Irina stood by the window of Holden's penthouse, staring down at the city. 1,000 lights blinked below, like stars trying to remind her of the world's vastness. She should have felt safe. But safety wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a memory. "It doesn't end here," she whispered. Holden stepped beside her. "No," he agreed. "But it begins here." In his hand, he held a sealed file from the safe house in Moscow, documents recovered by his team while Claire's operation unraveled. Inside were photographs, names, and codes written in her father's familiar handwriting. One name appeared more than once: Gravik, the missing agent, the traitor. And alongside his, another name, far more unexpected. Holden Ashcroft Sr. Irina turned the page slowly, her heart sinking. Her father hadn't just been hunted. He had been betrayed. By someone once connected to Holden's own family. Holden saw it too. "That's why they came for you," he said. "Not just because of what your father knew, but because of who he trusted." Irina's voice trembled. "They killed him to bury their deals. And I survived because he wanted them exposed." She turned to Holden, her eyes fierce now. "So let's expose them." Weeks later, The documents were leaked anonymously to an international tribunal. Political figures fell. Accounts were frozen. The old networks cracked, some vanishing, some retaliating in the shadows. But Irina and Holden stayed ahead of them, not just surviving, but fighting back, piece by piece. The wedding never happened. The guest list scattered. The ballroom remained empty, a ghost of what could have been. But something far more meaningful took root in its place. Trust, built not on illusion, but on survival, on truth, on fire. Irina closed the last file one quiet morning, sunlight washing over her face. "He always said secrets have weight," she murmured. Holden looked at her, a hint of a smile. "Then let's stop carrying them." And behind them, the past finally stayed quiet.